And welcome. This is CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams. Today we have something very special for you because this Friday, a great movie comes out. And, usually we do not do real timely, topical kind of, this Friday, coming Friday kind of podcast because these things live on and on and on. Therefore, you may be listening to this thing 3 years later. But we wanted to do something special this week because we have the stars of the new movie Unbroken, Path to Redemption with us. And this is really the follow-up to the Angelina Jolie movie Unbroken that was out 3 years ago or so, and was very successful. I just love that film, and this one is even better. So we have the stars with us, and we have the producer with us, and we have somebody very, very special and dear with us on today's podcast. And joining me is my good friend, life coach to the stars, Tim Storey.
And one of the things I love about this, David, is that, number one, it's a great story, and Angelina Jolie put a lot of time and effort to do the first movie. So this is the second one, Unbroken, Path to Redemption. And it really brings forth the redemptive part of this person's life. We find out how he changed, why he changed, and how that really made a big impact on his life.
And I think that he still holds the all-time record for living out on the ocean the way he did.
Yes.
When he went through what he went through. I can't imagine living out there amongst the sharks and having the sun beating down on you and what that's got to do to your mind and your body.
Tell the listeners the best way to pronounce his name.
Listen to this. Now you're putting me on the spot. See, it's Louie Zamperini.
You know what? You did that flawlessly.
Did I do that okay? So I got it right.
Yeah.
Zamperini, right?
Yes.
He sounds like he should be in a circus. The guy
the Zamperini brothers.
They're okay.
All right. So we're talking about this amazing movie. One of the taglines about the movie is "When the war ended, his battle began."
Well, I think that's the case for so many of our service people who have been through hell and come home. I have a lot of friends who were in Vietnam and they still aren't over it. And
yes.
They were highly impacted. I have a number of friends that lived through 9/11 that were right there on the front lines. Mm-hmm. And they still have nightmares and they still have all kinds of medical issues. And this is a story I think a lot of folks can relate to. The other thing is that this is really a story about the early days of Billy Graham and the Billy Graham Crusades and the impact that Reverend Graham had.
There's beauty in this story, and part of the beauty is that when you have a God idea, somebody is waiting for you on the other side of your obedience to your God idea. Because the backstory on Billy Graham, right? He's from Carolina, comes all the way to Los Angeles. This is the famous days of Puff Graham,
mm-hmm.
when Billy Graham starts coming to the forefront
mm-hmm.
in such a huge way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the days of the tent revival with Jack Coe, William Branham, Oral Roberts. In comes this guy from Carolina, Billy Graham, right? He's having this big crusade in Los Angeles. Little does he know that this man is sitting in his crusade who's been through hell, back and back to hell, and then back again. And he's about to get gloriously saved and his life changed. Somebody is waiting for you on the other side of your obedience. Billy Graham was obedient to go to L.A., have a crusade, change this man's life.
So from the film Unbroken, Path to Redemption, here is my interview that I recently did with star Samuel Hunt.
Yep.
Not the singer. Not Sam Hunt.
This great young actor. Very handsome.
And Merritt Patterson. They are magical together.
Yes. They look great on screen and did a phenomenal job.
And then, of course, we'll have the producer, Matt Baer, stop by and get his insight. Because, he is the guy kept this project going for a long, long time. You know, if you're going to be in Hollywood and you're going to be a producer, a lot of people think that, hey, you walk into an office and you get a deal done, right? And all of a sudden you go make a movie because it's a good idea. What people don't realize is that some of the best movies ever made took decades. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 years, took decades to make happen.
You're right. So he was patient and he persevered. And now we're going to hear the interview.
Let's do it. Merritt and Sam, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
And do you go by Sam or Samuel?
Sam's fine. Yeah.
Sam, okay.
By the way, I saw Sam Hunt last weekend,
Did you really?
the country singer.
I'm so jealous. That was really one of my highlights of this whole experience. Is walking into the audition and seeing Merritt be like, Sam, oh, you're not Sam Hunt.
So how did the two of you come across or get involved with this film? First of all, did you see the original before you were called in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I read the book. I read the book a number of years ago, and I was a huge fan of the book.
Yeah.
I remember pushing it on my dad to read, pushing it on a number of people. I was like, you have to read it.
It's definitely a pusher book.
Such an incredible story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had read the book and seen the movie.
Yeah. I'd seen the movie. I hadn't read the book yet, but that was one of the really nice highlights of doing this project, actually, was reading the book and just getting a much better understanding of who, he was, because I was very intrigued by it from the first film. I was a really big fan of the film, and I thought Jack O'Connell was great in the part and just everything about it. I mean, obviously the story is what the story is, but getting to learn more about that in the process of reading the book and preparing for the role was really enjoyable.
So we're talking about Unbroken: Path to Redemption. It's the follow-up to the original Unbroken, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference between this film and the previous film?
Well,
I mean, this picks up.
Yeah. For starters, you're picking up at a different point in his life. And so the survival aspect of it is very real.
Give our listeners an overview of his story.
Sure. So Louis Zamperini, he was born and raised in Torrance, California. And then he was a troublemaker by nature. And then his brother basically convinced the track team at their high school to take him on. And he convinced Lou by saying, hey, instead of running away from the cops, why don't you, run away from a flag, and beat some people and get kind of your energy out that way. And so Lou jumped in head first. And then at 19, he was selected for the Olympic team. He broke the national high school record for the mile. I think it was the mile time. Yeah. And I'm just an incredible, incredible athlete. And one of my favorite anecdotes actually about his experience was he was on the boat going from the United States to Germany because he went to the German Olympics, and he basically ate himself out of shape because he had never been in a situation where he was given so much free food. And so he was on this boat going across the Atlantic Ocean, and he just ate and ate and ate. And by the time he actually got to Germany, he had gained a significant amount of weight, and he was not in a good place to run at the Olympics. But when he did, and this is my favorite part about his experience there, is and this is a 3-mile run, he ran the last lap, I think, faster than anybody had run any of the other laps. So if you think about that, he had run 3 miles, and then the last, whatever it is, like quarter mile, he was able to do faster than anybody had run any of the other laps, which is, if you think about that, which is extraordinary that he has this. So he became known as the kid with the fast finish. But anyway, so from there, he continued to run, and then he joined up in the military. World War II started happening, and he was in a bomber that went down at sea as they were on a rescue mission, oddly enough, looking for another plane that had crashed. And he got stranded at sea for 200 plus days, and then got picked up in a raft. They shattered whatever the previous record was. I think the record before that was like 50 days or something like that, and nobody thought it was even possible. But then he got picked up by the Japanese, and so then for about 2 years, basically from when he was lost, everybody thought he was dead. And the thing that kept him alive is the Japanese actually knew who he was. They knew about his history, so they wanted to use him for PR purposes.
For propaganda,
for propaganda. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he was being abused constantly at the prison camps because of who he was. So it was this really interesting dichotomy of, you know, what it did to help him, but also what it did to hurt him. So he got through that, and then when
that's really that was film one.
That was basically, yes, that was film one.
And
so
then film two
picks up right when that left off. So film one ends with him getting back home. The final shot of the movie, I think, is literally him hugging his mother. And our film picks up with them now going literally on the drive home from the airport. So we're telling the part of his life that it's still, and from a survival standpoint, just as significant, but instead of the danger coming from outside, it's coming from within. And so there's a really strong message, and I think a really important conversation that happens through the film where we're investigating the tragedy, really, that is when people are put in situations where they're doing something for someone else and they experience this trauma, the fact that then they have to pay a second price when they get home and deal with that trauma and the effect that it has on them is it's just, I mean, it's tragic and it's just not fair, you know.
Especially in a time when PTSD wasn't really
it wasn't a thing.
Acknowledged
to
the extent it should have been. People didn't fully understand what that was or how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So that just added another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about it from a character perspective. This is a man who was able to essentially control his fate in a way. He worked his way through everything, every challenge that came up in his life. And so at this point now, he's dealing with something that he doesn't know how to fix. He doesn't know how to run through it. He doesn't know how to, to take the steps for survival. So it's a very interesting battle that he has to face, and how he tries to handle that, and also where he gets help and how he overcomes it's a very, very interesting story.
So when the two of you got the script for this, what really stuck with you? What was it that really brought you to emotionally want to be a part of this?
Well, I just immediately remember thinking of the book, which I loved so much. So I was really excited to read through the script. And in the book, his wife, Cynthia, there's a chapter specifically on her, and she's mentioned a little bit, but not in depth. So it was really interesting to get to learn more about her and her story and where she came from and how she dealt with all of this, and how she was a really significant part of getting Lou in the right direction.
Significant, I think, is an understatement. And without Cynthia, I don't think that we would know the Louie Zamperini that we know now.
When you're doing something that is based on a true character or characters, how much pressure is on you?
I mean, a lot.
I was going to go with all.
Yeah.
Can we go all the pressure?
Yeah. You want to do them justice for sure. And make sure you're portraying an accurate representation of who they are. And it was a bit difficult with Cynthia because there's not a ton of public information on her. We were able to get access to some of their old family videos from their honeymoon and see pictures. And we talked to their son and daughter, which was great, which was a great source of information. So that was really helpful.
Now, did they hang out on the set, or did they say, hey, that's not the way it was?
Cynthia and Luke were definitely on set.
Yeah, they were around for sure. For sure.
No, they weren't. They weren't jumping in and saying, "No, that's wrong."
No,
they were really
supportive.
Yeah, they were great.
There's that great Maya Angelou quote where she says, "She said, people don't remember what you did; they remember how you made them feel." And so, having somebody with that actual practical experience with them, especially on that intimate level, it's much easier to get a sense of how this person made them feel, and it acts as a good filter for what you're doing.
What do you do to fill yourself up with encouragement, with hope, because, I mean, look, there's a lot of rejection in this business, especially
99%.
Yeah, especially
0.9.
Yeah. So what do you do to just keep the dream alive and not give up?
Stay busy.
Yeah.
Stay busy in all aspects of your life. Surround yourself with people that are encouraging and that you just enjoy spending your time with. Is huge. I love to travel. Traveling always gets me out of my head, and it also puts things in perspective. I feel like if I start to get overwhelmed or unsure or whatever it is, as soon as I go traveling and you see life around you, people of different cultures, people with different lifestyles, it really reminds me that like, okay, no, this is what I love. I'm really grateful to be able to do what I love. And it kind of always puts me right back on the path that I need to be on.
Yeah.
So I find that super helpful.
Yeah. And I think that being of service is really, just in general, finding something in some way that you can be of service to other people will always reconnect you with kind of what the point is. Because in the end, I think that is really what the point of movies are. It is to be of service. It's you're sharing a story. And it's always the movies that don't have something that they're trying to say, or they don't have a message, or they don't have something underneath all of the excitement and the glitz and the glamour that are the ones that feel hollow. And we just don't know why. We watch, and people are extremely perceptive, but they just can't articulate what's wrong. So they'll watch a movie and it will have all of the aspects of entertainment, but for some reason you walk out of the theater and you're like, I don't really experience anything. It's because they don't have that underlying thing that they're saying, hey, by the way, this is a philosophy that we believe about life. This is a message that we think is important.
That's so true. And it's films like this that exemplify that point that you're making. And I really want to thank both of you for being with me here on the podcast.
We appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Now, coming up next, a special treat. We're going to take you under the hood of Unbroken Path to Redemption with its producer, Matt Baer. I loved the original movie. I mean, that was absolutely a tearjerker for me, but it was so inspirational. How in the world can you move us like you did in the first film?
It is a fantastic story. Louis Zamperini's life was remarkable, and as a filmmaker, Louis Zamperini's story is an embarrassment of riches in terms of having scenes, characters, themes that go on and on and on. But the dramatic problem was that when Lou came home after surviving a plane crash, 47 days at sea, 2 years in a prison camp, and he gets home and is embraced by his family. If that's not the ending of a movie, I don't know what to do. And so the problem was that the next half of Lou's life involved Cynthia, his wife. And there is no such thing as a movie where the actress comes into the movie at 2 hours and 20 minutes into the film. It wasn't possible. And also, we did not want to do the power of what happens to him with Billy Graham in a way that was going to feel rushed, because we would have been faced with the same criticism of people being disappointed that they didn't see that part of the film. And I would rather take the heat for people being disappointed versus them being angry that it was done the wrong way. And most importantly, Louis Zamperini was okay with the fact that the film was going to end where it did. I had hoped that the movie would be successful enough that we would be able to do the second half of his story. And fortunately, that's now happened.
Let's back up just a little bit. How in the world do you keep your wits about you, and do you keep the fire going to make something happen over a span of 20 years? I mean, that is a big chunk of your life. That's a big commitment.
Yes. I have a 20-year-old son, so my 20-year-old son knows nothing except what a Louis Zamperini is, and that I'm his father. I felt committed to try and inspire people to look at their own lives through the lens of Lou's remarkable life. The idea of everybody has struggles that they go through on a day-to-day basis. Everybody is seeking redemption for mistakes or struggles or suffering that they go through. Everybody seeks love, companionship, children, a family, a way to figure out how to make it through. And so I felt that if Lou had blessed me with being the person that he said, okay, you're a Hollywood producer, please go ahead and try, that I was not going to ever not honor that man's commitment to me. And everybody in the Hollywood community said no. Long before the book was done, I had worked on the film, trying to get the film made for, as I said, since 1998. And the book came out, I think it was 5 years ago. And so there was a lot of people saying no. But if a producer is worth the name, then you have to stick to what it is that you want to believe in. And in this case, I felt I'm not going to have an opportunity like this again, to have a story that I know in my creative gut and my heart would impact people. And so that's what kept me going. And there just was no choice. I was not going to give up.
When you decided to do the second film, there was a very definitive heart of the story that's really something that is very special about the Unbroken Path to Redemption. What is that?
There were two men that came together in a remarkable way, and that's Louis Zamperini and Billy Graham. And both men had many things in common. They were the similar age in very different places at the time that they met. And the idea of these two historic figures to be entering each other's lives and changing each other's lives is an amazing, amazing miracle of being able to say, okay, at the time where Louis Zamperini was at his absolute lowest, remembering finally the promise that he had made to God on the life raft during one of the horrible storms, where he had said, if you save me, I will seek you and serve you forever. And during the portion of his life where he was struggling, he did not remember that promise. When he was at Billy Graham's revival in 1949, the words of Billy Graham reminded him of that promise, and he was saved. And as a result of that, the nightmares that he was having as a victim of post-traumatic stress disorder finally vanished. And so the reason to tell that story is pretty clear. And the second reason to tell the story is that it's a wonderful romance between two young people at the beginning of their lives. Cynthia Zamperini had no idea what she was in store for when she married who she thought was a grounded war hero. And she ended up in a relationship with a man who was tortured by his past. And the fact that the two of them were able to get through that kind of depth of despair, though that's the reason to make the film, is being able to say, this is a remarkable true story that feels like you could have created it, but it's the truth.
And you have someone very special playing Billy Graham.
The usual casting process on a film, and it was certainly the case in the first film of casting Unbroken, to try and find Louis Zamperini, you normally are auditioning 15, 20, 25 people to try and find the right part. And in the case of Unbroken Path to Redemption, we knew that there was the character of Billy Graham. And so we thought, okay, well, we better get this right. And so there was only one person that we thought who would be right, and that is Will Graham, Billy's grandson. And Will doesn't have training as an actor, but he has the reality of, number one, it's in his blood. Number two, he is in the same place as Billy Graham was in the beginnings of his path. And he sounds exactly like his grandfather. So when Will came into my office for the first time, when we met, and Harold Kronk, the director, and I, when we went over the script with him, and I closed my eyes and listened, and I have years of hearing Billy Graham in my head because I know all of the footage of him, and I closed my eyes and I was mesmerized because Billy Graham's voice is hypnotic with power and clarity. And Will has that. And so I admire him. He's excellent in the film, and certainly with the passing of his grandfather, that it lends a spirituality to the film that is a very spiritual film to begin with. But I'm so happy for the Graham family that he can live on with his own flesh and blood. And I think that that's really going to impact people. I know when I now have seen the film hundreds of times, but every time you watch it, there's just that wow, this is taking it to a different level that we could never have gotten with a traditional actor. And so I'm proud of Will, and he is a terrific man.
Well, Matt, I couldn't agree more. He does such a fantastic job in the role of his grandfather, Billy Graham, in the film. I'm so excited to talk to him right now via Skype. And with us here on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, we have via Skype Will Graham, the grandson of the late Reverend Billy Graham. And Will actually plays his granddad in this film. And Will, as producer Matt Baer was just telling me, you had some reservations about doing this role. Why is that?
One of the reasons I was unsure about is because my granddaddy ran away from being an actor. When I say that, after the 1949 crusade in Los Angeles, in real life, he had movie deals popping up on his plate all the time. People wanted him to come and play in the movies and, be a major star because, he was tall, he was good looking, a great speaker, very emanated, all these things that they were looking for an actor that he kind of had. But my granddaddy turned them all down because he said, I got a more important job, and that's to tell people about Jesus Christ. But at the same time, he knew the power of it, so that even his own ministry would make movies later on. But it was very humbling. I remember preaching those nights, and when I was preaching those nights, it was just kind of neat to be there in California preaching that same message my granddaddy preached in 1949. So it was a wonderful privilege. It was a great experience, and part of me says, I hope I never do it again, though.
Now, did you ever get to meet Louis Zamperini?
No, I wish I had. He did come up to see my grandfather when he was doing his book tour, and he came by to the Billy Graham Library in Charlotte to, sign books for the public as they came in. And so right before then, he came up to see my granddaddy. The first time they'd seen each other in a long time. They had corresponded a number of times. They knew, they were friends. I don't want to say they were the best of friends, but they were very good friends. My grandfather wouldn't talk about Louis Zamperini all that much. He didn't talk about anybody that much except Jesus, in all fairness. He never saw the movie. He knew that I was making the movie, and so people saying, well, that's too bad he didn't get to see it. And I was like, well, you got to remember what we're seeing in the movie. He actually lived, and he may be real critical if he saw, that's not what happened. It happened like this, or it happened like that. And he's got the memories from it. So, to him, this is not a movie. These are his friends. My granddaddy in 2004 wrote Louis Zamperini a letter. I think it was his last letter that he wrote to him, or at least one of them, and said, he said they had watched a documentary that the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association had made on Louis' life. And so it's called Devil at My Heels, based on Louis' title of his book. And so he was watching it, and he said, and he wrote Louis a letter and said, "This is still the greatest story I've ever heard about a changed life." He said, "This needs to be made into a major movie, and I'm going to try to get this done." Well, he never did get it done, but God did in his own perfect timing. God got this movie done, and I'm so grateful to have a very, very, very small part in it.
So now the message in the movie, did you write that, or did that come from an actual sermon that your grandfather delivered?
The message I preach in the movie is a real sermon of my granddaddy's from 1949. At the time, we didn't know exactly what date that Louis came to know Christ. Louis was actually a little bit confused on it himself. He couldn't remember exactly what date it was, but we picked out a sermon that we thought fit the timeline and that we thought fit what Louis remembered of the sermon. And it was titled, here's the amazing title. You don't hear messages like this. His sermon was entitled, "Why Does God Allow Communism?" I mean, it's like, when's the last time you ever heard a preacher preach on that? And the reason why was because just the month before, the Russians had detonated the first atomic bomb. We were not the only ones now. And so if there's a God out there, why does God allow this evil empire to have such a powerful weapon? Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? That was kind of the gist of the sermon. Thus, the reason it hit Louis so hard, because he was mad because God allowed bad things to happen to him, and he thought he was a pretty good person. And that's what one of the lines in the movie is that he says, God and I, we are not on speaking terms. We're enemies. And so many people feel like that today. There's no difference. It's 60, 70 years later, but that pain and suffering is still there. And people still have those same questions. And that's what's so beautiful about the gospel. And God can still use this same message to reach into people's hearts today.
Now, what about Louis' relationship with Cynthia and her role in his life? I mean, his path to redemption was really ugly at times, and incredibly, she never left him.
Both her and Louis, both truly loved each other. And that's what's so beautiful about this movie. It is a true love story. The problem was he was self-medicating because of PTSD, things that they didn't quite understand, trying to deal with his nightmares that he was having and the hatred that he had. And he realized that was destroying his marriage. And he realized he was the problem. Cynthia wasn't the problem. Louis realized that he was the problem. He was a drunk. He just didn't know what to do about it. He thought alcohol, if I just drink, I can drown it and kind of numb myself so I can live a normal life. And it wasn't. It was backfiring on him. And so she wanted a divorce. And she loved her husband, but she couldn't take it anymore. She didn't know what to do for him. And then when my granddaddy came to town, someone invited some neighbors, some friends, invited her to come to see my grandfather. And she would give her life to Christ. She went back and told Louis, I'm not going to divorce you. I love you, and God does not want me to leave you. I'm going to stick with you through this. And that touched his heart so much that he was now willing to go with her. Even though he hated God, he was willing to go. Their marriage was changed instantly because Louie and Cynthia surrendered both their life and their hurts, their pains, their disappointments. They gave it all over to the Lord, and God used it for his glory and gave them 60 years of some of the greatest marriage ever.
Will, one of the themes that really resonated with me in this movie was the power of forgiveness. We see Louis come to a place of forgiveness for some of the absolute worst people you can ever imagine.
If there's one thing that destroys Christians is the inability or the unwillingness to forgive others. And listen, I'm guilty of it. Will Graham is guilty of that. And I was a former pastor. I know there's some strong, bad hurts out there, deep cuts, deep wounds, stuff that I can't even imagine probably has happened to people. But at the same time, hanging on to it is like hanging on to poison. It only kills you. I think that's why this is one of the greatest stories of forgiveness outside of the Bible. He received forgiveness from his wife. He received forgiveness from the Lord Jesus Christ. His life was now changed. And here comes the biggest part, was interesting, was that when Louis went to Japan to confront his captors, his Japanese tormentors, this is what was going to define if God was really true, because he hated these men. And he said, if I still hate these men, then I knew that what God did in me was not right. I mean, like, this was a fake. I've just been on an emotional high. That's it. But if I'm able to forgive these people, then I know that God's really changed my heart. And Louis said that when he got there, when he saw his captors for the first time, his heart was softened. And the only thing he felt was love for these men. And he had forgiven them. And instantly, he realized that what God had done in his life a few years earlier was absolutely true.
Well, Will, you did an incredible job portraying your grandfather in this film. And what I'm really excited about is for everyone to go see this and see the absolute amazing transformation that took place in Louie Zamperini's life, largely because of your grandfather and the impact that he made on Zamperini's life and the lives of millions of people around the world. You couldn't write a better version if you tried.
Well, we're real excited about it, and you know what? Even though the first movie didn't show it, I know a lot of Christians were upset, but there's no way that you could tell the full story of Louie's life. It's got to be one of the most exciting lives in the history of mankind. His life story is just so stinking awesome that there's no way that you can put it all in a 2-hour movie. And if anything, you need I told Matt Baer, the producer, I said, Matt, you need to make this a 5-day miniseries and do 2 hours every night on the story of his life. That's the only way you could do it true justice. And we're so thankful that Angelina Jolie did such a marvelous job on the first movie. It now gave Universal Pictures the ability to go back and do the second movie. And so we're grateful for that. And God has a plan and purpose in all this. And now we got to spend 2 hours on the best part of the whole story. So I think we won at the end.
So, Tim, what did you think about Will Graham, Billy's grandson?
Yes.
Playing Billy in the movie?
I was proud of him. I got a chance to meet him. He's a very nice young man. How awesome is that?
Do you know that for this movie, what they did is, because you would think, he could just sort of rattle off Billyisms and play Billy in a movie. Do you know that they actually researched the actual sermons that were preached during this time at those crusades, and they brought those to life for this movie? So this wasn't just Will Graham making up his grandfather. They actually went back and did the research and pulled that content into this movie from those days.
I didn't know that, and that's beautiful. So from the actors that we have, cinematography, phenomenal, scored at such a high level, a beautiful story of a man who was haunted by nightmares. He was tormented at times, didn't think he could go on. And then what happened at that crusade? Tell us.
His life was just turned around, and he really found his purpose. I think that he found that fulfillment that he was always looking for. I know I have, and you have a lot of friends who have served in our armed forces. They have put themselves out there on the front lines. They've made all kinds of sacrifices, and I've never been in that position. I don't want to downplay. This isn't like, hey, go to a crusade and your life is going to be changed like that. Bam. Yeah. It's just not quite that simple.
It's not. And I think that one of the things that did happen to him at the crusade is that the light was turned on. And that's always the beginning.
That's good.
Is that the light has to be turned on. So now you can see life from a different perspective because now the light is on. And so now the journey really begins at that time.
So let's talk about that. You've given me another something here.
Tim Storeyism.
Tim Storeyism. The light has to be turned on.
Yes.
In order for you to see.
Yeah. Otherwise you're in trouble because you're walking in darkness. And so it's like you travel and I travel. Sometimes when I wake up in a hotel room I've never been in before, and I have to wake up to find the restroom in the middle of the night, it's a problem. I'll bump into furniture. I'll sometimes trip. Because I cannot find where what? The light switch is. If I turn the light on, I can now see the room. So many people are stumbling through life without turning on the switch.
Okay, so I need you to help me out here.
Yes.
Okay? Because you're onto something. I'm hooked into it. Let's say that there's a part of my life where the light isn't turned on. I can't seem to turn it on, and therefore I'm stumbling in the dark, right? In this particular case, it's in regards to my relationship,
Yes.
right? The light's off. I'm stumbling in the dark. I'm doing just stupid things.
Okay.
How do I get the light on?
Am I life coaching David Sams?
Now
at this
you're
moment,
life coaching
or am I
me.
just talking to the general public?
Yes, you can start the clock now. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, David, there is a light, but a lot of it depends on the wattage. A lot of research in this area. I even went into a market last week to study wattage. Okay. So, you have as low as 30 watt bulbs and 60 and 70, 80, 100 watts. So I think a lot of people are trying to make big choices under a 30 watt bulb. They see dimly. Isn't that so powerful?
Yeah.
So you got to turn the light on, but you got to have the right wattage. So some people think they turn in the light on because they asked their friend for advice. You know what? You just asked a 40-watt person for advice on your marriage.
Mm-hmm,
That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
You better find somebody that's at least at 80 watts when you are looking for the right kind of answers.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're looking for clarity. You're looking to be able to see everything in living color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's happened in your life before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of the choices that you made in your life that we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
on air and off the air, would you admit there were times that your light was dim when you made the choice?
Oh yeah, it was definitely lights out for me. Yes,
Okay.
many times.
You couldn't see clearly.
Couldn't see clearer.
I've been there too. And what lowers the wattage? People that were around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Influences.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we watch. Things that we hear. It's called the eye gate and the ear gate.
Mm.
The eye gate is what you see. Just because it's on doesn't mean I got to watch it. Just because it's playing doesn't mean I got to hear it. It's all choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so going back to this movie for a minute, he went to the Billy Graham crusade, and Billy Graham's words, because he was preaching truth, turned the wattage on at 100%.
Mm.
So now he could see.
Mm.
God will 100% wattage you.
So you just got to plug into that source of energy.
100%.
Yeah.
And now I could see. Now I can see what's around me. I can see the obstacles. I can see the pitfalls. But sometimes you're going to see things you wish you didn't see.
Mm.
You're going to see people in your
But
camp.
you're seeing.
Yeah. People in your camp that are after you, that want to hurt you. Someone you could be married to that wants to take you out. That's why some people like to walk around at 30 watts.
Mm.
Put those 100 watts on, you're going to start seeing stuff.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, the movie is Unbroken, Path to Redemption. It is probably one of the most inspiring movies that I have seen in a long, long time.
Yes.
And that stars today's guest, Samuel Hunt and Merritt Patterson. And I would highly recommend that you go see it. Take a few friends to see it.
Yes.
You will be inspired. You will walk out of the theater on fire. I think it's probably the best film of this genre that I've seen since I Can Only Imagine, which,
Yes.
of course, is one of my favorites.
And it's good entertainment, and you don't have to leave the theater feeling a certain way.
Right.
I think so many times we go as people that have light in us to be entertained, and we leave with a bad feeling like you have to take a shower. So this is great entertainment, and it's a true story, and it'll show you that you can turn your mess into a message when the lights come on.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Remember, you can get us for free. You can download us for free. We're on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, and of course YouTube, or a number of other places where you normally get your podcast. But definitely encourage someone who needs some extra tools in their toolbox, needs some encouragement to download our show. Don't keep it to yourself. We're trying to make encouragement contagious right here on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. Tim, thanks for making yourself available today.
What a great program, David. Life is good.
Yeah, it sure is.
People's lives are changing. Today's decisions are tomorrow's realities. Make good choices.
And remember, I lived a lot of my life in black and white. I hope that you're not living your entire life in black and white, because it sure is a lot more fun living it in living color. So go out there and juice it up a little bit. Have some fun. Get you a dashiki. If you don't know what a dashiki is, check out our new websites. We'll see you next time right here on CIA.